disorder on my students and ways to support them. Depression is a word that is commonly thrown around in the middle school setting by both students and teachers. When I was a middle school student, many of my teachers thought I was depressed because I dressed differently, and my passion behind this subject is rooted in that misconception and ensuring that I don't do the same to my students. To start with a little bit about me, I've been in education for 6 years. I've been a middle school art teacher on both the Kansas and Missouri side, experiencing 3 different school districts from charter schools to public schools. I am currently working in Shawnee Mission School District teaching art explorations, art 2D, and art 3D at the middle school level. I am also the art club sponsor and a volleyball coach. The ways in which I impact students include that I am on the KAEA board where I share lessons and help with advocacy for other art educators across the state. I also teach 180 students daily and 360 students over the course of the year. This photo shows me working on landscape paintings with my beautiful students. I also run an art club that serves around 30 students bi-weekly. This project was a collaborative ink painting. And lastly, I'm a volleyball coach where I work with the entire program of 90 girls and specifically with 22 players that are on teams A2 and A3. To start this presentation, I look to our book, Teachers as Counselors by Kotler, for the definition. Depression is defined as a pervasive mood disorder in which the child feels sad and withdrawn with muted feelings. There are several different kinds of depression, including endogenous, dysthymia, and reactive depression. Depression causes feelings of intense sadness, causing various emotional and physical changes, as well as an inability to function at school, home, or work. Endogenous depression is a biologically based disorder that is caused by a neurochemical imbalance in the body. Dysthymia is a chronic but less serious mood disorder in which there is no serious disruption of sleep, appetite, or daily functioning. Reactive depression is an acute response to some crisis or distressing situation, like grief, adjustments to life changes, and so on, that is not quite so extreme to warrant a diagnosis as post-traumatic stress. Throughout my research, I noticed that many sources were saying that there has been an increase in the number of adolescents diagnosed with depression, as shown in this graph. The statistics show that from students aged 12 to 17, there has been as high as a 17% increase in the diagnosis from 2016 to 2017. I believe that as our community becomes more aware and educated about mental health issues, the stigma is decreasing and parents are reaching out for help earlier on in the child's life. I also believe that social media has caused an increase in mental health issues within the youth population. The history of depression is one that is riddled with misconceptions and setbacks that cause the stigma around the diagnosis to increase. Through my research, I was extremely interested in the changing views and how they led to some strange interventions throughout its history. Depression was initially defined in the early Mesopotamian culture and referred to as melancholia, and was sometimes thought to be the result of demonic possession. Hippocrates, a Greek physician, thought depression was caused by an imbalance of body fluids. For melancholia, he thought that there was too much black bile in the spleen and recommended bloodletting as the cure. Cicero thought that depression was caused by rage or grief, and it was the first time in history that it had been attributed to a mental issue. In the 5th century, when people were suspected of melancholia, they were locked up in lunatic asylums. During the Renaissance, it was determined that people with melancholia needed mental health treatment that was humane. In 1621, Robert Burton created an encyclopedia that explored the social causes of depression as well as potential supports such as diet, distraction, but still bloodletting. During the 18th and 19th century, research was still being conducted and produced a variety of claims, such as that depression is inheritable or an unchangeable weakness, which led to further mistreatment of the population. In 1980, the DSM-2, or diagnostic system, classified depression as its own category and documented specific symptoms. In 1988, a year after the Food and Drug Administration approved Prozac, 2,469,000 prescriptions for it were dispensed in America. By 2002, that number had risen to over 33 million, and by 2008, antidepressants were the third most common prescription drug taken in America. In Mukherjee's article, the idea that the drug companies and psychiatrists were working together to push the industry of antidepressants for financial gain, and that it may not actually be rooted in benefiting our youth's mental health was an interesting thing that I found out. Symptoms for depression can be tricky to identify as a middle school educator because many of my students are experiencing big changes in identity, which causes some residual sadness, which is expected to accompany the shifts that are happening in their lives. However, Kotler outlines the symptoms as, in mild cases, sadness following an identifiable stressful event that precipitated these symptoms, low energy, poor concentration, low self esteem, and no history of recurrent episodes. In severe cases, disruption of normal functioning, appetite loss, sleep disruption, weight loss or gain, listlessness, withdrawal, abject hopelessness, rumination, and suicidal thoughts and possible intent were the symptoms. Through all the research that I did, I discovered that all sources stated that if the feelings persisted for longer than 2 weeks, that was when it was time to seek out help. These symptoms can look different depending on the different age levels, which is why we're going to explore in these next slides. Symptoms for elementary age students can consist of loss of joyfulness, unexplained aches and pains, increased irritability, loss of skills, and changes in daily habits. This could look like frequently complaining about aches and pains, even though you know there's nothing physically wrong, and all the way down to isn't gaining weight at a time when students are growing rapidly. If your student spends time vegging on the couch or in front of the TV, loses interest in daily activity, and says things are boring. At the middle school level, the symptoms mostly stayed the same, but there was an addition of adding reckless behavior. This could look like seeming distant, spending a lot of time behind closed doors, uncharacteristically irritable or angry, could be acting out with risky behavior, doesn't see a future, or has had dramatic changes in daily habits. At the high school level, we get an addition of extreme despair and self-destructive behavior as other areas of symptoms, which could also look like talking about feeling stupid, thinking one bad outcome means that everything else will be a disaster too, obsessing about shortcomings, and again, acting out with risky behavior. Now that we've outlined the symptoms, it's important to talk about support. There are a variety of supports that exist within the individual teacher, the school, and the community that are available to provide support to students suspected of being depressed. The most important thing is not to ignore the warning signs and assume it is nothing until it has been investigated. If at any point the educator feels that the conversation is outside of their scope of expertise, then referring the student to another support is necessary. The support skills that would be considered best practice at all levels, including with elementary, middle, and high school students, would be to start by actively listening to the student, both verbally and non-verbally, showing that you care about what they say. Work on developing a trusting relationship so that they can share with you the things that they're thinking. Use open-ended questioning strategies to get students to share. Close-ended questioning strategies would only warrant a yes or no response, so using open-ended questioning strategies will get you more information. Reflect the feelings and content back to the students so that you make sure that they feel heard. Raise consciousness, including through connecting patterns and challenging exaggerations. Help reframe thinking. Identify and confront irrational thoughts and feelings. Have them rate the intensity of emotions, and then set goals and encourage them to try new ways of behaving. In Kotler and Kotler's book, it was very much said that we need to avoid advice giving, as it either leads to blame or learned helplessness. Again, if you feel at any time that it's outside of your scope, or you could just use a team to collaborate with, here's a list of some supports that exist within most schools. You could have a mentor teacher that could help normalize things for you, provide emotional support, or try to help understand your experiences. Other teachers could give you perspective on the student in other classes as well as their attitudes. The principal can provide support, could give background information that would be helpful. The counselor, remember, these are the ones who are really qualified to help you with this. So they can provide support and guidance, help provide problem solving skills, and can even triage with the student and you if you want to continue counseling them. The school nurse is available to provide health supports if it's vision or dental, or especially with depression, since eating habits are closely related. They could even provide you with information to help your student feel more healthy in that way. The school psychologist, again, offers a wealth of support and information. They can offer programs on important topics. And then the homeless education community liaison, which we do not have in my district, but we do, or which we do not have in my specific school, but we do in the district, can provide extra supports and can even provide opportunities to the families. Parental support is super important because it helps you to bridge the gap between school and home. And that's imperative in developing wraparound support for a student in need. Parent collaboration will also allow the teacher to get a more complete picture of what is going on with the student, as well as sharing concerns, identifying trends, and providing emotional support for the parents. Other support ideas I had were to invite the student to join a new club to extend their social circle, uh, coordinate a school wide kindness challenge to increase the joy factor at school, refer to the school counselor to place them in a student group that is struggling with similar issues, provide positive praise to encourage better self image and inspire hope, and help them identify trusted adults and friends. If a student expresses suicidal thoughts or is a danger to themselves, you must immediately contact authorities and report to DCF. That can be a little scary, so I use this mandated reporting reference sheet before I put in the DCF report. Shifting gears to the hypothetical middle school student concern, I started with kind of imagining where in my classroom I could see this potentially come up and where I've seen pieces of it in different kids. I noticed a student who was withdrawn from other students, chooses to sit alone, refuses to participate in group discussions, and is drawing some dark content in his sketchbook. The student is redefining his gender identity and is transitioning from female to male. The student asks to go by a different name in class and informs me that if I call home, I cannot refer to the student by the selected male name. The student is artistically talented but does not take an interest in projects, and the student's grades are failing in all classes after looking at Skyward. How would I address the student? I would start by praising the student for their artistic talent. Encouragement is a good way to start building a trusting relationship. I would invite the student to come in during Eagle Hour, which is a rolling entrance at our school that provides a 20-minute window for kids to get settled. I would sit with the student and start by active listening with verbal and nonverbal cues to ensure the student knows that I care about what they are talking about. I would start with open ended questioning and ask general questions first, like, how is school going this year? And what are some of your interests outside of school? Through these questions, I would begin to dig deeper into the concerning behaviors, including that I noticed that he doesn't seem to want to participate in the projects. The student then reveals that he has a hard time caring about anything anymore. I would restate the feelings of the student and ask how long they had felt that way. Once we had determined a timeline, I would try to get him to identify any significant changes in home, school, or life that developed around the same time. Once the student identified some changes at home, like how his mom does not like that he cut his hair short and started dressing differently, I would then try to help the student identify the underlying themes to push towards a place of resolution. Once the student hears the themes, he states that his mom doesn't love him anymore and that there's no use to keep living. At this point, I would make sure that the student knows that I am a mandatory reporter and that it is my job to make sure that he can get the help that he needs. I would then ask if the student has thought about suicide. The student confirms that they just don't care about anything and that it is difficult to keep showing up at school every day because school sucks, grades are bad, and his friends are becoming more distant. And he doesn't really want to kill himself, but he doesn't know what else he can do to try to fix himself. I would then assist the student in a problem solving strategies to brainstorm the ways he could respond to his apathy. We would start by brainstorming options on how to talk to his mom about how he's feeling. The student would suggest writing a letter, sitting down with her, showing her a TV show about kids who don't identify with their own gender. He narrows it down and decides that he wants to write her a letter. I offer support and encouragement in this task and set a timeline to check in again about how it went. We also role play the conversation after mom reads the letter so the student can work through potential responses. We then shift gears and identify other areas in his life that he would like to work on and improve, and he identifies making more friends and getting better grades. We follow the same process to identify and narrow down ideas for each of the issues. When the student is finished, we talk about how they will respond if the proposed solutions do not work. I would set a weekly meeting time with them, continue to check in on them during class, and encourage them to continue working with their sketchbook to help work through personal feelings. I would also ask if I could refer them to the school's counselor. The student agrees, and I set him up with our grade level counselor. I would share with the counselor the things that I had discovered with the student. I would also share concerns about the student being suicidal. I would ask for advice on if I should report the behaviors to DCF, and if suggested, I would ask the counselor to help me develop a report to send in. If I sent it in, I would also notify the grade level principal as per protocol in my building. I would be hesitant to contact the family until the student checked back in with me about how the conversation went after the letter. Some other support ideas would be, like I said, to refer them to the school counselor, to invite them to come to the LGBTQ plus group that meets after school. I could ask the student to help me with a special art project to continue to praise their drawing skills, and use our weekly meeting time to check in on progress with grades, friends, and family.